Welcome to the Explainer. You ever wonder how a search engine just gets you? Or how your phone knows exactly what word you're about to type? Well, it's not magic. It's all because we've been teaching machines how to read. And today, we're going to pull back the curtain and show you exactly how it works.
So, first thing you have to understand is that computers don't get language like we do. Not at all. They can't feel the nuance or the context in a sentence. See, a computer lives in a world of pure math. So this entire field, which we call natural language processing, or NLP, is all about one giant puzzle. How do we translate our messy, beautiful human language into the one thing a computer truly understands? Numbers. And this is basically the roadmap for that whole journey. I know it looks a little technical, but think of it like a recipe. We start with some plain old text, we chop it up, we clean it, and then at the very end, we turn it into numbers. So let's walk through this whole thing step by step. Okay, let's dive right in with the very first, and you could argue the most important step of all, tokenization. Seriously, everything else we do is built right on top of this. So what is tokenization? Well, in the simplest terms, it's the art of chopping things up. We take a sentence, any sentence, and we just break it down into its most basic pieces. We call these pieces tokens. And usually that means each individual word, but it can also be stuff like punctuation. So if you take a nice, clean sentence like NLP is powerful, the tokens are pretty obvious, right? You get NLP, is, powerful, and even the exclamation mark. Each one becomes its own little item in a list. Simple enough, you'd think. But, this is where our perfect little example runs smack into the messy wall of reality. Because the real world gets complicated, and it gets complicated fast. What do you do with something like Mr. O'Neill? Is Mr. a single token, period and all? And what about O'Neill? Is that one name? Or do you split it at the apostrophe and get O and Neil? The decisions you make right here have huge consequences for what the machine understands later on. And this problem just pops up everywhere. Is coeducation a single idea, a single token, or is it two different parts, co and education? The rules you set for how to split, or more importantly, not split, these things can totally change the final meaning. It's just a minefield of choices. And oh boy, this right here just perfectly illustrates why a simple split it at the spaces rule just falls apart. This one single German word means life insurance company employee. And lots of languages do this. They build huge concepts by just sticking words together. It makes tokenization a really complex, language-specific puzzle. And we're not just talking about words anymore, right? In our world, emojis, hashtags, URLs, they all have their own unique meaning, and they all have to be handled as their own tokens. Getting this first chopping step right, well, it's the absolute foundation for everything else that's about to happen in NLP. Okay, so let's move on to the next stage. Now that we have our big list of tokens, we gotta clean them up. This whole step is about making everything consistent, and it's called normalization. Think of normalization as kind of like tidying up your messy kitchen after all that chopping. We do simple things, like making everything lowercase so that the with a capital T and the with a lowercase t are seen as the exact same word. We might strip out all the punctuation. And then we get to these two really interesting and kind of competing techniques, stemming and lemmatization. So first up is stemming. You can think of this as the quick and dirty method. It's kind of like a blunt instrument. It just follows a set of really simple rules to aggressively chop the endings off of words to get down to a common base, or what we call a stem. For instance, a really famous algorithm, the Porter stemmer, uses rules exactly like these. It's not thinking. It just sees a word like caresses, and bam, it chops off the ES. It sees ponies, replaces the IEs with an I, and you're left with pony. It's incredibly fast because it's just following a simple checklist of rules. So here's the key thing to remember about stemming. While it is blazing fast, the result you get isn't always a real word. As you can see here, studies become studi, which isn't a word at all. It gets the job done, sure, but it's not exactly elegant. But then, on the other hand, we have lemmatization, and this is a much, much more sophisticated approach. It's the brains of the operation. Instead of just blindly chopping off endings, it actually uses a dictionary to find the true root of a word. It's lemma. Now, to do this, it has to consider the word's part of speech. Is it a noun, a verb, an adjective? All of that takes more computer power. So yeah, it's slower. But the huge plus is that it always gives you back a real linguistically correct word. Studies becomes study. It's even smart enough to know that the base form of better is actually good.
So, choosing between them really is a classic engineering trade-off. What's more important for what you're building? If you're making a search engine for a billion documents where every millisecond counts, you'll probably go with stemming. But if you're building a smart chatbot that has to understand what a person is really asking, you'll gladly pay the price for the accuracy of lemmatization.
Okay, here we go. We have chopped up our words with tokenization, we've cleaned them up with normalization, and now we get to the real climax of our recipe, finally turning these words into meaningful numbers that a machine can actually use. So the first idea you might have is, hey, let's just count how many times each word shows up. But that's a trap, because common, almost meaningless words like the, or is appear everywhere, all the time. If you just count words, they'll get all the high scores and just drown out the actually important keywords we're looking for. And this is where this really clever technique called TF-IDF comes to the rescue. It stands for Term Frequency Inverse Document Frequency, and it fixes the problem with this awesome two-part score. First, it looks at term frequency. That's the easy part, just how often a word appears in this one document. But then it calculates inverse document frequency. How rare is that same word across thousands of other documents? So, here's the magic. By multiplying those two numbers together, TF-IDF gives the highest scores to words that are super important and characteristic of this specific document. A word like galaxy would get a massive score in an astronomy paper, but practically 0 in a recipe for cookies. It's how machines learn to figure out what a document is really about. So, TF-IDF is amazing at finding the words that are statistically important. But notice something. It doesn't actually understand what any of those words mean. It has no idea that king and queen are related concepts. And that gap, that space between statistical importance and actual meaning, well, that's what pushed the whole field forward to its next big leap. And that leap brought us to modern stuff like word embeddings. See, unlike TF-IDF, which is just counting words, embeddings actually learn the relationships between words. They figure out that the relationship between king and queen is kind of like the relationship between man and woman. It's a much deeper semantic understanding. Now, it's way more computationally heavy for sure, but even with these new powerful tools, the raw speed and the easy-to-understand nature of TF-IDF mean it's still a go-to tool for tons of jobs like basic search or filtering documents. This whole journey, from simple words to complex numbers, is really the engine behind the AI revolution we see all around us. Understanding this process isn't just about knowing how today's tech works. It's about getting a glimpse of where this incredible frontier is headed next.